Most people get this debate completely wrong. They argue about trophies, they argue about World Cups, they argue about legacy. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Legacy doesn't tell you who was better in their prime. It tells you who ended up greater, and those are not the same thing. Because if football was only about medals, we wouldn't even need to watch the games. We'd just read Wikipedia. But when you actually sit down and analyze Prime Neymar and Mbappé, prime purely through football ability, menos skill set, control, influence, clutch moments, something interesting happens. The answer stops being obvious. This isn't about who will be remembered as greater. It's about who, at their absolute peak, was the superior footballer. And once you separate greater versus better, the Prime Mbappé debate becomes far more complicated than most fans are ready to admit. Prime Neymar versus Prime Mbappé. Not legacy, not trophies, just ability. Who was actually better? And before you answer too fast, you might be confusing greater with better. And that mistake changes everything. Because when people debate Prime Neymar and Prime Mbappé, they hide behind trophies, narratives, World Cups, headlines. That's safe, that's easy. But strip all of that away. Forget in their peak. Better in their prime. That's the uncomfortable question. And once you really look at peak Neymar without filters, the conversation gets very serious. Here's the real problem with this debate. People argue about who's greater when the real question is who was better in their prime. And those are two completely different conversations. If we're talking about greater, we're talking about trophies, World Cups, career legacy, Ballon d'Or narratives. That's history. That's resume. But if we're talking about who was better, now we're looking at key passes, big chances created, dribbles completed under pressure, game control, total involvement. That's football ability. So yes, Mbappé might end up greater. That's a legacy conversation. But this video isn't about legacy. It's about peak level. Prime Neymar versus Prime Mbappé. Skill set versus skill set. Impact versus impact. And once you analyze it that way, peak Neymar becomes a very serious problem in this debate. When we talk about Prime Neymar, we're not guessing. We've seen it. Neymar Prime Barcelona wasn't just flashy, Manos. It was devastating. In the 2015 Champions League run, he wasn't a side character. He was decisive. Goals in the quarterfinals, semifinals, final. That's not hype. That's Neymar Champions League Prime delivering in the biggest stage. And then there's the Remontada in 2017. People remember the scoreline, but they forget who controlled the chaos. Free kick goal, won the penalty, assist in the last seconds. Those are clutch moments, yes. Menace, but more than that. It showed something deeper. He wasn't just finishing plays, he was creating them, accelerating them, dictating them. That's what a complete player looks like. Prime Neymar could score, assist, slow the game down, speed it up, take set pieces, dribble in tight spaces, absorb pressure, and still create big chances. That's why many called him the most complete winger of his generation. He wasn't just a weapon, he was solution, chaos, and control at the same time. And when you compare that to Mbappé Prime, the conversation starts getting very interesting. Now let's talk about Mbappé Prime, because ignoring it would be dishonest. At his peak, he was terrifying. Pure acceleration, defensive lines collapsing the second he touched the ball. In transition, he wasn't just fast, he was unfair. One through ball and it was over. That kind of explosiveness changes games in seconds. And then there's the Mbappé World Cup 2022 performance. A hat trick in a final. Let that sink in. That's not normal. That's the definition of a big game player. Those are undeniable clutch moments. When the lights were brightest, he delivered. No hesitation, no fear, just elite finishing under maximum pressure. But here's the uncomfortable question again. He was unstoppable. But was he complete? Mbappé Prime gave you speed, directness, ruthless finishing. But did he control the tempo? Did he orchestrate? Did he create at the same volume as peak Neymar? Because once you shift from highlight plays to total influence on the game, the debate takes another turn. This is where the Prime Neymar versus Prime Mbappé debate stops being emotional and starts being technical. Because if Mbappé is a weapon, Neymar was the entire system. Mbappé Prime is about explosion, attacking space, elite finishing. Give him grass to run into and it's basically over. He bends the game with speed. But peak Neymar? That's different. That's playmaking, dribbling in tight spaces, chance creation, tempo control. He could drop deep, receive between the lines, dictate rhythm, draw fouls, create big chances out of nothing. He didn't just attack space, he manipulated it. That's football IQ at the highest level. Look at playmaking versus finishing. Mbappé's strength is finishing sequences. Neymar's strength was starting them, building them, and finishing them if needed. That level of versatility matters. A versatile forward who can both create and destroy is rare. And when you talk about higher peak, you're talking about total influence, not just goals. Because goals end the play, but control shapes the entire match. And once you analyze Prime Neymar through that lens, especially compared to Mbappé Prime, you begin to understand why some players feel dangerous and others feel dominant. And the stats actually start backing that up. Now let's put real numbers on the table. During Neymar Prime at Barcelona, he averaged roughly 0.85 to 1.0 goal contributions per game in his best seasons. But here's what most people ignore. He averaged around 2 key passes per game, consistently ranking among the top creators in Europe. He wasn't just finishing moves, he was generating them. Mbappé Prime at PSG averaged slightly more goals per game, often around 0.9 goals alone per match in his peak seasons. That's elite, that's ruthless. But his key passes and big chances created numbers were significantly lower, usually around 1 key pass per game or less. His role was different, more direct, more vertical. So yes, Mbappé scores more pure goals, but Prime Neymar gives you goals, assists, creativity, tempo control, fouls drawn, set pieces. His total involvement per match was higher. That's the difference between a finisher and a complete player. And once you see that contrast clearly, the Prime Mbappé debate becomes a lot more nuanced. So here's my opinion, and this is just my perspective. When we isolate peak versus peak, when we strip away legacy and future projections, Prime Neymar was the better footballer. Not greater, better in their prime. And that distinction matters more than people think. Why? 3 simple reasons. First, completeness. Prime Neymar could create, finish, dictate tempo, draw pressure, break lines with passes or dribbles. Second, unpredictability. Defenders didn't know if he would shoot, assist, slow the play, or embarrass them one-on-one. Third, decision-making under pressure. His clutch moments weren't just about scoring, they were about controlling chaos. Mbappé Prime is explosive, devastating, a nightmare in open space, and he might very well finish as the greater player historically. But peak Neymar had more tools, more ways to hurt you, more ways to influence the entire game. And when the debate is strictly about football ability, that versatility becomes very hard to ignore. And if that's true, then the final question becomes even more interesting. So let's make it simple. If you need raw speed, verticality, immediate destruction in transition, you choose Mbappé Prime. Give him space and he'll punish you. 1 run, 1 finish, game over. That's why his clutch performances feel explosive. They hit fast, they shock you. But if you need control, if you need someone to dictate rhythm, create under pressure, unlock a low block, draw 3 defenders and still find the right pass, you choose Prime Neymar. Because he doesn't just attack the game, he shapes it. He bends it to his will. That's football ability at its most complete form. 1 game, 1 final. Prime Neymar versus Prime Mbappé. No legacy, no future projections, just peak versus peak. Who are you trusting? And more importantly, why? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to see who you're backing and what your reasoning is. If you enjoy deep football debates like this, real peak comparison, real analysis, no lazy narratives, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications because we're just getting started.